Who are some known people that have done horrible that the public forgot? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Katy Perry kissed a teen on American Idol because he had told the judges he had never been kissed. He initially said no to her offer, but she kept pressuring him by saying, "Oh, just on the cheek." He finally leaned in, and then she turned her head and kissed him on the lips. Which, remember, he said he didn't want to do. Everyone went on about how he's so lucky, and he'll be getting all the girls now, and totally ignored the fact that this grown woman forcibly kissed a teenager on national television. I know this isn't nearly as bad as some of the other comments, but it upset me so much. Story 2. I don't think a lot of people know how horrific Mike Vick's dogfighting operation was. He is just on TV in a suit, and nobody seems to care. It was bad, but in fairness to him, he did experience legitimate consequences and did time. He had since actively fought against the practice, lobbied for stronger legislation against it, and became an advocate for the Humane Society. I think there's a point where we can forgive in a way, and be thankful that some do truly regret their past and work to be better. Story 3. Mother Teresa. Either people didn't know or people knew, but the cognitive dissonance of wearing rose-colored glasses left her blameless and canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church. I don't know the full breadth other than some articles and podcasts, but in short, despite accepting millions in donations from around the world, her clinics were nothing short of torture halls that allowed people with manageable conditions, or at least symptoms that could be improved, to suffer and die. In a number of instances, die with treatable conditions. The people in her clinic suffered with lack of proper care, untrained nurses, unsanitary practices, where, for example, needles were reused on different people. And she even went so far as to refuse aid offered in donation to her. Meanwhile, she sought and received proper medical care, even though her whole MO was allowing people to suffer to be closer to Christ. In today's culture, I think many are starting to come around to this, but it sickens me, especially that someone like this isn't viewed as just a person, and an awful self-righteous one at that. Story 4. Queen Elizabeth I knowingly got the population of England and its colonies addicted to tobacco. Despite Arabic scholars studying it, and coming to the conclusion that it makes you sick in the 1600s years beforehand, in order to reverse the bankruptcy being caused by the colony of Virginia. After a bunch of shenanigans caused by industrialists in the 13 colonies, England cut her losses in North America and used the money collected from tobacco to start the opium trade. Source: American Capitalism 1400, presented by Dr. Roy Casagranda of the University of Austin, TX. Edit: meant to put in the 1600s years beforehand, not 600 years beforehand. I got caught up in adding to the post rather than fixing the actual errors. Story 5. So, I'm getting the feeling a lot of the people in this thread are pretty young. You guys have been raised in a generation where you realize that this type of behavior is wrong. All of the celebrity sexual abuse allegations and so on, as someone who grew up in the 90s in a fairly well-to-do area, this stuff was as widespread as people who smoke weed today. The celebrities might be the best example that we all know of, but when I went to parties, like college parties when I was in high school, like any little degenerate, it was common to see guys in their mid to 20s, sometimes 30s, hooking up with high school girls. A lot of them were maybe 14, 15 on a good day. It happened on a weekly basis, and these were areas where you had Corvettes and Ferraris parked outside. I think the reason people are almost hyper aware of this sort of thing today is because of how widespread it was back then. It wasn't just fun sex either. Some of these girls were passed out on the couch. People were not intervening if someone tried to take advantage of them. I think it harmed a whole generation, which is yet another reason why, if you talk to most women in my age group in their 40s, practically every one of them has some type of terrible story. In fact, I can't think of one in my own friendship group that doesn't. So those of you who weren't old enough to grow up through this and today experience an almost hyper-awareness of consent and appropriate behavior. What was taking place in the 80s and 90s is what created the situation you now live in. It's hard not to draw parallels with racism. Whole generation normalized that, the next generation that really put their foot down, and then after that it's just absolutely toxic to be racist whatsoever. It's how society changes. Story 6. David Bowie had underage girlfriends and loved the baby groupies of that era. It's not even a hidden thing. It's just that people want to give him a pass so bad, while they all over other celebrities that do the same, and rightly so. People will be hollering about pedos in Hollywood and music right up until you remind them that someone they like is part of that mess. And suddenly, the fingers are in their ears. They'll shit on all the rest of the bands from that era that were openly f***ed up about hanging around minors, like Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. But Bowie gets a pass for whatever reason. Story 7. Bill Clinton had more flights logged on Epstein's jet than any other guest. Witnesses testified that Clinton was on the island and that he likes them young. Multiple witnesses and victims testified in court that Alan Dershowitz abused children provided to him by Epstein. Richard Branson, Les Wexler, Prince Andrew, David Copperfield were named in court testimony by multiple victims and witnesses. Epstein provided children for cash, and people are acting like it's political or a rumor. These Epstein clients are a danger to children everywhere. Story 8. Albert Einstein cheated on his wife with his first cousin Elsa, whom he married but not before approaching her daughter, Ilse, to ask her to marry him, which she rejected. What's super great is that he slept with Ilse while Elsa was acting as his mistress and home nurse. Was bedridden with stomach ulcers and still found the time and gall to muddy the family waters. Then when Elsa found out, he told the two women to figure it out regarding who he would marry. He also dragged his feet divorcing his first wife. He wrote some vitriolic letters that stated he refused to live with her but wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a divorce. And he was confused as to why his children didn't want to visit him. Einstein was a brilliant mathematician and scientist, but a terrible life partner. Story 9. James Dean, the porn actor, accused of rape and physical abuse by a lot of women, but he's still in the industry being hired, and tons of women are doing scenes with him and being watched by God knows how many people. Dude gets to consensually f*** beautiful women for a living, and it just isn't enough for him, or what? Then again, it's not too surprising. It seems like the type of person who become a male porn star is probably already hypersexual and gets off on the weird power dynamics of it. Story 10. Teddy Kennedy drove his car into the Chappaquiddick and left Mary Jo Kopechne to suffocate, not even trying to get her help. He went on to enjoy a long career in politics. 19 years later, the 1988 Democratic Convention was held. Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis was nominated to go up against VP George H.W. Bush. Ted Kennedy gave the keynote speech. It went, "When weapons were being sold to Iran, where was George? When this, when that, where was George?" A few days later, the Republican convention was held. T-shirts were selling briskly. On the front they said, "Where was George?" On the back they said, "Dry, sober, and home with his wife." Story 11. Don Henley's song Dirty Laundry is all about how unethical the press can be when they want a story, and how they will not respect privacy if there's a lead. He wrote this in the wake of the media attention he got when a 16-year-old girl overdosed at his house. He was convicted of a misdemeanor crime, and was very much in his feelings about how mean the press was to him in that difficult time of his life. When I was in college, I worked at a bakery and Don Henley custom ordered several dozen cupcakes. When he came to pick them up, a middle-aged lady recognized him and said she loved his music, to which he responded by yelling at her to leave him the f*** alone and then stormed out without his cupcakes. Don Henley sucks. Story 12. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, while he was mayor of Hamburg, authorized the police to forcibly administer emetics to suspects. A minor died as a result of this practice, regarded as torture by the UN. He also seems to have some involvement in the biggest tax fraud scandal in German history, Cum-Ex, but keeps claiming to not remember anything about it, and has been caught straight up lying to the parliament about it. The authorities responsible for investigating this are under the direct control of his finance minister on the federal level, and his own former finance senator on the state level, who is also his successor as mayor of Hamburg. No one seems to care, and the statutes of limitations are about to expire. Story 13. Brett Boofer Kavanaugh allegedly sexually assaulted multiple women during his college years. The FBI received 4,500 plus tips which were not investigated. The FBI director, Chris Wray, instead sent them directly to Trump. To this day, the tips still haven't been investigated. Biden refuses to fire the traitorous FBI director, and the public never mentions them. We have a potential serial on the SCOTUS, and nobody with investigative power is willing to investigate Kavanaugh. Nobody ever brings up those tips anymore, and I find it appalling, especially since trust in SCOTUS is at an all-time low. Another person is Louis DeJoy. He directly interfered in the 2020 election by destroying mail sorting machines. Biden gave him a high five afterwards and refuses to appoint people to the Board of Governors who are willing to fire DeJoy. Even Garland refuses to indict DeJoy, despite him going for round 2 in the upcoming election. Whenever it's brought up, it's just normalized that we can't trust mail-in voting anymore. Instead of getting rid of the traitors, the government appeases them. Story 14. Steven Tyler and Jimmy Page both became guardians of the teen girls they were dating to avoid kidnapping and any other charge. Plus, there's a long list of musicians who dated teens. Priscilla Presley was just 14 when Elvis first met her. What's sadder is just how normal it was very recently. When I was young, it was basically expected that teen girls would date older guys. You'd see in magazine articles about how young men would struggle to date because they were competing with older men who had cars, houses, and money. When I was 13, I knew half a dozen girls dating guys 19 or older. When I was 17, most girls I knew had or were dating someone at least 10 years their senior. Everyone knew. Literally, nobody had a problem with it. Parents, teachers, media, nobody cared. And no, I don't know why. I stopped finding teenagers attractive when I stopped being one. Dating one at my age would feel creepy as fuck. But yeah, it very much was not just celebrities. It was shockingly normal very, very recently. In 1990, 16-year-old Garcia met Prince backstage in Barcelona after he saw a tape of her dancing. After she graduated high school in Germany at the age of 17, Prince became her legal guardian. Upon moving to Minneapolis, Prince and members of his team helped set her up with her own apartment. At first, I stayed at the Sofitel. Then they moved me to a nice little prairie house at the Country Suites, but I couldn't even make a cup of tea there, so they got me an apartment and rented furniture. She said. When she was 19, Prince instructed her to get on birth control, thus beginning their sexual relationship. After a 4-year courtship, they married on February 14, 1996. Story 15. I'll name a couple that aren't here. I wouldn't say people forgot this, because those that already know would probably never forget. But I'll go with many people who do not know how horrible they were. Mother Teresa. She did heinous shit like refuse stop patients from basic medical treatments that would have certainly saved their lives and/or pain. Basically, she believed those that had terminal illness or pain were deserving of it in the name of God. Just Google it. The Dalai Lama, so this guy has perpetrated a message of passiveness and peace all his life, which sure is a good message. However, where the horrible part comes in is more around the position and religious superstitions around the Dalai Lama itself. Basically a theocracy where all power decisions came down from the Dalai Lama. I am certainly not saying that Chinese communists marching in and taking over Tibet is a good thing, but the society that was there before the Chinese came in was not the greatest, to put it mildly. I am sure a lot of that message has been pushed by communist China. But there are many more credible sources that support that pre-1951 Tibet was a serfdom where ultimate authority fell on the religious leaders. In practically any scenario, this usually means you have a large portion of the population that gets exploited, or is certainly not totally free. It is an interesting topic and a good rabbit hole to go down if this kind of stuff interests you. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.